So first things first, let's talk about the concept of prototyping and some of the theories behind it. So first and foremost, prototyping is a concept of this thing called iterative design. And iterative design kind of entails that we don't just sit down once and design something, perhaps discreetly, then sit down and do some research somewhere else and kind of come up with our final design, right? Things go through numerous iterations as we start to consider different contexts that that app or website or video or written work could be used in different ways for different ends, different users, different use cases. So iterative design and this concept of prototyping, they're part of the design thinking model that we've been working through. How can we incorporate stakeholders and users and, all manner of people surrounded by a one design kind of challenge or problem, and how can we incorporate all of their feedback and knowledge and kind of requirements so that we actually understand how users are reacting to things that we're making. This allows for different feedback loops to kind of generate stakeholder insight, so we can constantly kind of be referring back to the end users and the people that are going to employ whatever we make. And this also, in thinking of this in a kind of transmedia capacity, this method of kind of prototyping, researching, working with users, and kind of doing that in numerous loops puts us in a place where we're kind of bridging the consumer and producer relationship, as well as, say, a user and architect relationship, where we're actually trying to merge or blend all of those kind of different opinions and behaviors and attitudes about a particular thing into one, kind of prototyped concept that we reiterate numerous times as we get more and more insight into the challenges that we are facing as we're designing something. So when thinking about prototyping, we often use this term fidelity. We think of prototypes as being low, medium, or high fidelity versions of, say, a final product that we are going to be making. Again, be it an app, a website, anything that you can kind of quickly and cheaply kind of show the usability of the thing that you are creating, as well as you increase the fidelity, as you increase what that thing looks like in relationship to its eventual kind of final product status. We're kind of increasing with fidelity the ability that users have to be interactive with your prototype or your kind of proof of concept, right? We establish that something can work and does work, then we try to test with users or readers or viewers, whatever it may be, so that we can adequately and in real time be kind of upping the fidelity of our prototypes alongside user research that would kind of evidence and reaffirm why we've made the design choices that we've made. A big question that I often get, especially from those who are fairly adept at creating traditional media like audio, video, photo type stuff, as well as websites, any of this kind of thing. A big question I get is, why do we do this? Why is this important? If I have the ability to kind of full-blown create something kind of out of the gate, if I have those skills, what's the worth of prototyping? And I think that there are numerous reasons that I'll kind of detail for why we prototype, but I think at its core, the reason that we prototype is so that we can very cogently point to evidence in our users, readers, viewers, stakeholders in what we're making. We can evidence kind of what they say, how they interact with what we do multiple times, so that ideally, after we've kind of gone through several cycles of iteration of one particular design project, we have a final version that is really robust in its evidence from not only kind of traditional, say, scholarly sources or case studies, but also in relationship to the users that we've discussed our process with and discussed our project with. That's ultimately why I think that this is very important to learn. So in summary, we do this for a number of reasons. The primary reason is that doing this iterative process connects stakeholders to each other and to the design challenges that we as the kind of creators are facing as we walk through user data and our ability to construct media and writing and all of these different concepts. We're kind of consistently in communication or interacting with our stakeholders about what we're making. As an extension of that, doing all of these iterative cycles, we are able to pinpoint different steps along the way in our design processes that we can kind of maintain our knowledge durationally over time. You know, what did we learn on the first iteration of this particular prototype? What, what direction did that send us in? It's a way of kind of easily maintaining durational progress of any sort of design challenge that you might be facing. There's a few other reasons why we do this, but ultimately I think that what's most important about prototyping and by extension running usability tests and user research related to those prototypes is effectively that it's cheap. We have this kind of concept that we tend to try to fail early and fail often. So we fail early with prototypes that didn't cost much money to make, didn't take much investment in terms of paying someone to generate media assets or anything like that. Graph paper, pen, paper, being able to show kind of interactive processes with things like post-it notes and other different materials is a great way of being able to assess whether or not what you're making is actually usable before you full-blown, full-sail go and make something that's going to cost a lot of money and potentially not meet the ends of your stakeholders or your users or numerous different things. So it can be really helpful when thinking about prototyping to look at some real life case studies, look at how some people have employed this method of prototyping even within kind of a design thinking methodology or perhaps just in a market research for branding and marketing purposes. It can be really useful to look at a number of case studies. So I'm just going to detail a few for you. I'm working within a presentation software called Novio that allows me to do links in a kind of specific kind of flip deck. But I know that using Novio typically requires that someone's viewing it with Flash, and that can cause some issues. So I'm actually probably going to be uploading this video to YouTube again, and I'll be also adding these links that I'm going to be kind of talking about to our Canvas site so that if you're unable to click them in the YouTube video, you'll be able to check them out on Canvas so that you can get a real kind of case study knowledge of how people are employing prototyping. So this first kind of case study that I've given you is a really concise breakdown of common methods for prototyping and best practices for understanding different interactive processes, ways to show interactivity without necessarily using digital tools, paper prototyping, like I've said, things like post-it notes, and being able to show directionality, paths for, say, how you get in an app from this thing to that thing. A big kind of core message that comes across in a lot of these articles about common methods and best practices is that we're ultimately looking for prototypes that are usable and testable. That's kind of what differentiates a low fidelity prototype from, say, a sketch, in that a sketch can kind of show some broad ranging things, but prototypes are most effective when you can put them in front of your users, give them a series of tasks, and see if they can complete them, how they do that, how they go about that. So check out this link. This will be up in Canvas. This is from the Interaction UX Association, and it's just a really good breakdown of different ways that you could approach prototyping. So this case study is one from a little while ago, but it's a pretty formidable one. It's from a company called IDEO. They're a design firm that are largely pioneers of methods like design thinking and kind of incorporating stakeholders into what they make. This is about a 20-minute video kind of detailing how they tried to take a common object and through gathering insight and kind of iterating on different concepts, they were effectively able to change the design of a standard shopping cart to meet specific needs. And in this video, they also kind of show their kind of design process. It's a really, really useful one for kind of starting to think about how you could do this in teams and kind of bringing different expertises together to kind of think about kind of the same problem or this same design challenge. So check out that video as well. And the last one that I'm going to talk to you about is, I think that this one's kind of hokey a little bit, but this is from an Apple design conference. Apple and most large tech companies have some sort of prototyping wing or have employees that kind of utilize that skill, especially as we have kind of growing market areas in things like usability and user experience research and design, kind of putting that as a formidable kind of thing that people need to be aware of, how a user experiences the content that you have. So this video kind of is presented from an Apple designer who's talking about his ability to prototype something very quickly in, he's using a program called Keynote, but just by way of kind of understanding how you can kind of rapidly test a singular idea. This is about a 10-minute video presentation where he kind of walks through his process of going through prototyping using a tool that you may or may not think to use. Okay, so at this point you've watched a couple of videos, checked out some different websites related to prototyping, different methods, best practices, how people have kind of utilized this in real-world scenarios. So I just kind of wanted to generally summarize the kind of application of the technique for prototyping. So the application of this prototyping technique takes many different forms with many different materials, often is determined by the people that are kind of surrounded by the design challenge, whoever it may be on your team, your kind of group of people, whether it's just you or whether it's numerous people kind of working for this to the same ends. Application can kind of manifest several different ways, but I kind of wanted to just generally break down how prototypes are used. So for one, going back to this kind of sketch versus prototype, so that we kind of understand this. Sketches, or something where you're kind of mapping, understanding your ideas very quickly, something that would be potentially like a prototype for a piece of marketing or branding, or understanding the broad strokes of this particular thing that we're designing. That's what sketches are useful for. They're not particularly useful for generating things that are testable or usable, giving users tasks to interact with that sketch. You can't really do that with a sketch. You need to think about these prototypes as a way of gaining user insight by testing with the people who would actually potentially read this story or visit this website or use this app or whatever it may be. So we talk about prototypes a lot in terms of fidelity and interactivity. So increasing interactivity between a user and the proposed design is a way or a means of understanding how your users are going to interact with your particular piece of media or platform or whatever it may be. Over time, we try to look to testable tasks and think about them in relationship to our desired outcomes. Do we want to raise awareness for a social cause? How is someone's ability to navigate this website or enact these tasks, how does that help or hurt our desired outcomes based on what people are telling us? And the idea is that increasing the interactivity of your prototypes will also, by and large, eventually increase the fidelity of that prototype to getting closer to kind of the desired final outcome or final product that you're going to make. So it's just like kind of a quick low form example that I can grab from something that's really close by. Let's think about this lecture that I've made in terms of prototypes. I started with a really basic sketch with an outline that kind of detailed all of the points that I was going to be making in this lecture to you. Then kind of taking that through to a mid-fidelity prototype, I generated the PowerPoint presentation that was visually designed and kind of geared toward this one purpose. And then kind of in terms of high fidelity, we have this final lecture where I've incorporated not only the writing and kind of outline of this lecture, the visual design aspect of displaying it to you guys, but then I'm actually adding my own voice, my own video, kind of having that final lecture experience that hopefully generates more interactivity between you and I as kind of me the creator, and you, the users or the viewers. So that's kind of just a low form example of how you can move from very basic low fidelity prototype or a sketch into something that's high fidelity. So just as a basic thing. And you guys let me know if you enjoy these lectures or you have suggestions for how I could kind of increase interactivity, make them more involving, more useful. Please let me know. So a major component of prototyping is this concept of visualization within design. So being able to effectively render a concept, idea, or product through research and writing, media production, strategic communication, generating platforms, utilizing platforms, all of these different skill sets, we take those and we use what we have within our design teams to increase the fidelity and interactivity of our prototypes. And we do both of those things so that we can better understand kind of our intended audience and methods of capturing feedback from them that actually generate and elicit useful data, as well as increasing the fidelity of our prototypes to better project and pitch products to our desired outcomes so that we have a better handle on what we're actually trying to make over time. Okay, so your assignment for this week. We're thinking about interactivity and how we can increase it in this class. We're also looking at prototyping to understand how we can use that concept and tool set to better ascertain our users, better ascertain how we should be making something. So your assignment for this week is going to kind of combine both of those ideas. So for this assignment, what I want each student to do is prototype a new solution to an ongoing problem. Now, this is a design problem, so not necessarily that you're going to solve world hunger, but you may be able to do things like prototype an awareness campaign through social media so that we can better understand or ascertain hunger-related issues, say here in Muncie or Indiana or the United States or for a particular population or anything like that. You could also prototype a new solution for a to-do list app or any kind of app, any kind of website, so long as what you are kind of proposing kind of requires the need to generate and iterate different prototypes for that particular design challenge. So in thinking about this, your focus could be a campaign or a story, an app, a website, creative media project. It could even be a common product that you want to redesign. Look at IDEO's shopping cart video or what they've done with toothbrushes and several other different things. So your focus could be on generating really anything that kind of involves some necessity to prototype that solution out and potentially get feedback from users. So similar to your focus, but more thinking about what you actually want an outcome to be of the thing that you prototype. Different desired outcomes could be things like raising awareness for something, recruiting people to some sort of call of action, be it through social media campaign or something else, generating better user experience for a common object, common product, or something that you use in your everyday life, be it software, be it a piece of technology, anything like that. Additionally, things like generating different amounts of kind of storytelling and entertainment, applying things to a particular field like health or social justice or really anything like that that you want the desired outcome to be improved upon by the prototype that you're generating this week. So lastly, your final deliverables for this assignment this week. I want everyone to put a short discussion video in our discussion section for this week that kind of details or walks through your prototype. So this is effectively kind of a show and tell of the thing that you decided to design for and think about how you could kind of generate a prototype for something new. In addition to that, I also want you to upload into Canvas any sort of associated media that you generated for this project. So in answer to how should I go about thinking about the materials that I use for this particular prototype, pretty much anything is fair game. You can use pen and paper, post-it notes to kind of indicate interactivity. If you are adept or familiar with digital prototyping tools or you want to learn some this week, that would be an effective kind of piece of media to bring in as your final deliverables. But effectively what you need to do with this initial prototype is indicate how you would use this prototype to actually test this thing with users. What kinds of tasks would you be having users do to interact with this prototype that you make? So you can use your pen and paper, your graphs, you can use post-it notes, you can use cardboard models, you can use anything. I would point you back to that common methods and best practices interaction UX website that I kind of discussed in previous slides for methods of effectively prototyping. But those are going to be your final deliverables for this assignment. Lastly, if you're working on something for another class project, something that's longer form, say, than what we have to do this week, or something that you've really been looking to kind of get a head start on, bring that class project into this course. Try to prototype something for that project here in our class if you think that having that time to be able to do that on a different class project could be really useful to you. I'm always interested in getting to know what you're working on, say outside of this class, and I think that if you want to fold some of that into what we're doing here, I think that that would be very welcome and really helpful for discussion and interaction.